Today we talk about. I got this apartment. I was very lonely, and this was always an idea of mine, but I never committed to it. And then I finally committed to it. But around the time I committed to it, I was really starting to find a groove between New York and Iowa, and at the same time, I started to really delve into the comedy stuff. And when I really delved into the comedy stuff, like anytime I'm in New York now, I try to do 2 to 3 stand-up sets a day, man. And the last time I was here, I burned out doing that shit because I was doing it 2 to 3 times, sometimes 4 sets a night. And usually I'm here 2 weeks and I'm in Iowa working as a doctor for 2 weeks. But the 2 weeks that I'm here not working, I'm out doing stand up. And I started making this running joke, which is actually working out pretty well in the comedy circles, where, because I'm a doctor and I have this like engineering, science, math background, when I tell my friends in such fields that I'm doing comedy like 2, 3 times a day, like that's what I'm doing with my free time, they look at me crazy, like as if I just said I'm doing like 2 to 3 karaoke's a day. and Speaking of podcasts, I made that joke for the first time on the Bad Asians podcast, which I highly recommend you guys check out. I did an episode on there, so if you enjoyed this podcast, you should see my guest starring episode on the Bad Asians podcast. Excuse me. Which I got to tell you, man, they do a much more professional job than I do. I'm going to see if I can start using that studio that they use, actually, because they have a great space down there. It's all set up, and I don't want to get into the details, but I really think if I could get into a groove there, granted, it's kind of a hike to get down there, but that's just me being lazy. You know what I'm saying? I don't even have to drive. That's what I love about this city, bro. I hate driving. and yeah, I just had a fantastic time doing that podcast. A guy that's been following me from day one, essentially. He was telling me, David Nguyen, one of the comics here in New York, formerly from San Francisco, where he was doing, I believe he said, 8 years of stand-up out there. And him and his buddy who's still out in San Fran, they do a podcast now through this studio I was at, where I was asked to guest star. And David found me through YouTube and follows me on Instagram regularly, interacts with me on Instagram. And he, thankfully, very humbly asked me to be on the podcast, and I had a great time. I truly had a great time. It seemed like they had a great time with me there, and I just had so much fun, like being a part of other people's podcasts, let alone comics podcasts, man. Like it felt so good to do that, and that's one of the things I commented on was like, how everyone thinks I'm doing karaoke. But anyway, it's exhausting, man, because like more exhausting than like having the energy to get on stage and like do stand up is realizing that you're spending hours waiting for your fucking 5 to 6 to 4 to 3 minutes. Like that's, because you have to, it's a struggle, man. Like no one's going to hand you anything just because you're a doctor. No one's going to hand you anything just because you think you're the shit. Like you got to put in your time. Like if you want to be good at this, you want to be part of this world, you got to put in your time, find the open mics, go there, interact with the other comics, just make it happen, Captain. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, man, it's exhausting, man, because it's literally an all-day process. Like I'll be done doing open mics after a full day, and I'll look back and I'll be like, holy shit, dude, I just spent 8-9 hours doing open mics. And when I say doing open mics, like I spent 8-9 hours to do 15 minutes of fucking material. You know what I mean? Most of it being recycled, and I'm still bad. I'm still an open micer. I still just fucking started, right? So it's like I'm still not good. You know what I mean? So it's just like, was that really worth it? Like I could have been working and making an obscene amount more money, if money was the sole driving factor of all this, then I'd be crazy to pursue the stand-up thing, right? And I created a stand-up joke about that, which I'm not going to do. Just watch my stand-up, you know what I mean? I post every set to YouTube, by the way. And fuck, man, this just turned into another stand-up episode. I promise by the end of this, we're going to discuss at least one independent topic. I promise. I promised it to myself, so I promised it to you, which means I further promised it to myself, so we gonna do it. But yeah, this is just so fresh on my mind, and I haven't had a chance to like really flesh it out and talk about it, especially to you guys as my audience. So I really want to do that. And I think the more podcasts I've been listening to, by the way, on iTunes, on the podcast app, I think I'm starting to get a better idea and rhythm for this whole podcast world. So I'm really going to try to see if I can get this ish on actual podcast mediums. Because again, the content's there. It's just a matter of like pushing it, right? And the reason I kept it all to YouTube is because I'm more of a visual podcast watcher anyway. And I figured that's where my biggest audience is. So that's where they're going to find me anyway. So why bog myself down with the logistics of getting it on all these other platforms when, you know, that's just going to further burn me out or drive my energy away from actually creating content for you guys when, again, this is the main source that you guys are going to be watching this, YouTube, at least for now. You know, we'll see what happens. But anyway, yeah, man, I had a great time on that podcast. And I was just piecing together the fact that like I'm doing 8-9 hours of open mics, spending time waiting for my turn to do it the same way everyone else is. So it's like you're not performing for a crowd, you're performing for other open micers, which is depressing in some respects because you are trying to impress people that aren't really listening to you. Like they're just, I know myself, like I'm not even listening to half these comics when I haven't gone yet. Like I'm just in my head, like thinking like, okay, can I use some of their bits to inspire some of my next bits in my own act coming up? Or like I'm rehearsing my own act. Oh, okay, I'm going to do this joke first and then I'm going to do that joke. Like I'm thinking all these million different thoughts. And so I'm not laughing at their jokes because I'm not really listening, which is disrespectful in some respects, but it's also just the game. Like that's just how it goes. So I can't be surprised when no one laughs at my jokes, especially when it's a sad room, it's depressing, no one's really in the mood. It's just like a sad environment. But the key is someone put this in perspective for me. They were just like, dude, that's what it is, man. It is what it is. And if you're not willing to go through that fire to come out the other end and be like, you know what? No, I know this is funny. Or, hey, I know this was shitty, but I muscled through it and I have the confidence and I got a chuckle in this open mic crowd. That will turn into a guffaw in a real crowd. You know what I mean? And like, that's how you build yourself. That's how you, kind of give yourself these battle bruises to come out the other end as like a successful comic. So like that's a goal of mine, you know, like not everyone does this, by the way, to be a successful comic. Some people do this as a legit, just a hobby, and they find it as a release. They just want to meet other comics, hang out at the bar afterwards and go home. But for me, it's like I would never do this if I didn't think I could be like super good at it someday, you know, maybe in 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, 11 years. Hey, hopefully in 3 years, shit. But you know, I luckily I'm in a position where I'm not in a rush. You know what I mean? Like I have a steady job, an amazing job. I'm starting to find out like this comedy thing does not pay well at all. Like we're looking at the 1% of comics who are making multi-millions of dollars. And again, that's not why I pursued this, but yeah, like as far as like having a sustainable career as a comic, like the majority of these like well-doing comics are really not doing as well as I'm doing now. And I'm not even working full-time and I'm still doing comedy. So like in a lot of respects, I've already, quote, won this game, you know what I'm saying? But like, it's just my competitive nature to like want to be good at something, not only because I feel like I can be good, but because I feel like I could bring a lot to the table for the world. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I could contribute so much as a comic and as an entertainer and day and just like all these other life experiences that I could expose myself to and interact with people and you know, all that kind of is, you know, we don't have to get bogged down with that. But anyway, we're getting off on a tangent, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, man, and to swing this all the way back around, I think that's why it's been tough to like get back to this podcast consistently, because every night I get home after doing these long hours of just like waiting and then doing stand-up and then interacting with comedians afterwards and having a good time, where I just get home and I'm just like, that was a genuine yawn, by the way. And it's tough, man. It's tough to just like sit down here and like bring it for the camera. Luckily, that is a skill set of mine. I ain't gonna lie to you, you know what I'm saying? But it still takes energy out of me, man. I'm not a natural extrovert. I feel like a lot of people slide into my DMs being like, oh my God, you're shy. What the fuck are you talking about? I don't believe you. You're like, shut the fuck up, motherfucker. No, but for real, that's really who I am. This is a comfortable scenario, like we discussed before, because I'm in control here, motherfucker. I'm alone. I got the whole city looking, I'm looking up. I'm looking down on the whole city. I'm like, yeah, I'm here. What it do, cuz? And it allows me a confidence and an arrogance to be able to do this. You know what I mean? Because like y'all are watching me, and I'm really just like looking at a camera lens. You know what I'm saying? It's like different. But anyway, I see a little blink going on the ish, so we're gonna pause it and restart. Hold up.